You're listening to the Cambridge Insider Podcast. On today's episode, hosts Mariah and Stephen take a look into the future of international education. Today's episode is sponsored by Long Island Lutheran Middle and High School. Long Island Lutheran delivers a Christ-centered college preparatory education through engaging, enriching programs that foster personal, academic, and spiritual growth. From grades 6 through 12, they are committed to developing compassionate and educated leaders for the future. Thanks for listening.
Cambridge Insider Podcast time. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cambridge Insider Podcast. As we move in the US into the fall, our schools are fully on the go, and we're just hearing great feedback of all our new students who have started the fall semester with their new programs and the new host families. So it's been a busy time at Cambridge Network. As per usual, my co-host, Mariah Thompson, how are you?
Doing well, doing better, knowing that we just came off of a week of doing some colleague bonding last week. For most of you know, we're mostly remote for our employees. So even though Stephen and I podcast host together, we don't actually see each other pretty often. So it was definitely delightful to spend some good colleague bonding last week with everybody. So shout out to all our other Cambridge colleagues that are listening. We love seeing you. It was a really good time. And also good news for our school partners. We did a lot of strategic planning for you guys this year. So it's a win-win for all of us when we have those employee summits. So doing well, refreshed and energized to continue the school year.
Absolutely. It is just a quick note on that about the strategizing in particular. I feel refreshed. And there's just a lot of exciting developments at Cambridge, which is great. And I think the overwhelming theme from the entire week, well, at least that I took away, was student success and student success stories. And if we can have students that do really well because we have awesome schools and we have awesome hosts and we give them awesome support services, those are the students that really create us as Cambridge and take the brand of their schools further as well and go on to just be awesome contributors to the world. So some really nice takeaways, and excited to see what the next year has in store for us.
Definitely. And I would also say add on to that, like student success and then building relationships. So we're hoping that through this podcast, as if you're a school partner of ours already, we would love for this to be a continued way for you to have checkpoints in with us to know what's going on within our company, as well as in the market, which is a big thing that we're going to talk about today. I think in a lot of our episodes, we kind of lean on our expertise. Like Stephen and I definitely know what's going on in the market. It's what we're doing. It's our job. But today we're going to talk about, as in the international education sphere as a whole, what's happening. And a lot of the times when we talk about different articles and research, we definitely highlight the IIE, which is a big organization. Their slogan is the power of international education. But last March, they released a brief that we didn't highlight. I mean, March is a really big student recruitment time. So we had different focuses for you guys on our podcast. But now that we're heading into the new year and you guys are settling into your new year and maybe thinking ahead to the future, we just thought that this would be the perfect time to release our summary and what we think about this brief. And so the IIE released something called the Outlook of 2030 brief. And so, again, we all know it's 2024 now. And so they're looking at the outlook all the way to 2030. What is happening in international education, how they forego what it looks like for in this article, they talk a lot about universities, but as me and Stephen have always said, what trends in the universities really has a huge effect of what we see in the high school market, because majority of their students are doing high school into university. So it's directly correlated, which is why we talk about it and emphasize it a ton. But so if you are looking at the show notes and you want to look at this article for yourself, you'll see a lot of the verbiage for that. They do talk about high schools as well, but majority will be for colleges and universities, but it's equally as important and noted for what we see on our end as well. So like we do typically, I'm going to highlight and summarize major key moments from this article. And then Stephen and I will discuss it and bring it back to the high school market, bring it back to being a partner with Cambridge and what that means for you. So just to reiterate, this is the Outlook 2030 brief, the U.S. and International Education by Alan Goodman and Mirka Martel on the IIE website. Check the show notes for the link. So as we were debriefing, Stephen and I just discussed how there are 5 different key moments that we want to go over. And so the first one, which is always the best one to always hear, is that international students are growing in the U.S. And so it says here, by 2030, the number of international mobile students will grow from 6 million in 2023 to over 10 million. And that will be 1/5 will aim to come to the United States of that. So, Stephen, what does that mean?
I mean,
how do you feel?
I feel really, really happy because that is good news. That is the culmination of the comeback of this market. Despite all the challenges, geopolitical challenges, obviously COVID is a huge sort of bump in the road as well. I think that just proves that we are back on track with the international market. And I think many of the schools and partners that we speak with are under the illusion that perhaps the market is not doing that well anymore. Perhaps there aren't students coming anymore. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And this research points to exactly that. The international market is strong, it continues to grow, and it will almost double statistically by, in the next 5 to 6 years, which is a significant amount of new students. What has changed, and we continue to come back to this, is how you position yourself as a school. How are you attracting these students? What type of product are you putting out, as an international program? Those are things which we will discuss further in this podcast, but things that you really need to be looking at. If you are doing pretty much the same things that you were doing in 2016, 2017, 2018, even 2021, post-COVID, 2022, and you are not seeing students, it's not because there aren't students in the market, it's because you're doing the same thing. So just let's keep that as sort of an entry point into this article.
Yeah. So reiterate, there are students. And then the number 2 statement we wanted to pull from this is that international students are coming from many world regions. It actually says that international students study in the United States from over 210 places of origin. Now, Stephen, as you are someone that connects with different schools, onboarding them to be a Cambridge partner or just discussing student recruitment, what does this mean for you as you're onboarding schools? Like, what does this mean for you?
Yeah, I love this as well. So a lot of good news coming from this article. You'll probably hear me say I love this or this is really positive, but more and more schools are looking for diversity. I think there are 2 main reasons for that. Number one is the majority of F1 high schools have plenty of students from China. Doesn't mean we want to stop seeing students from China. We love our Chinese students. They add a great element to all of our campuses. But many schools already have a population from China and are looking to diversify that. So that's point number 1, or diversify a little bit of the international population. And point number 2, you do have some schools that are maybe not popular in the Chinese market. Maybe there are other schools in and around their region that for the Chinese market in particular will be a little bit more popular. So where does that leave you as a school partner? You've got to start looking elsewhere. So we are having conversations, plenty of them, with schools and potential school partners about diversity, right? And going back to my first point again, when you think about diversity, when you think about getting students both from China but from outside of China as well, if you want to get students from different regions in China, or you want to look at students coming from Taiwan, or if you want to look at students coming from Vietnam or from Korea, you've really got to think about, number 1, how are you positioning yourself? Again, if you're doing it the same as you were in 2017, you're likely going to keep running against a brick wall. What product are you putting out there? What product is noticeable to students coming from Vietnam? What product is noticeable for students coming from Korea? What are they looking at? Not just what price point they're looking at, because that's super important, but what extracurriculars are they looking at? How are we going to position your academic program to make it more Vietnam centric or Vietnam focused? So these are the types of questions you've got to be asking. Number two as well is considering how are you reaching that population. So if you do have a great product that you think can bring that diversity in, how is the world finding out about your great program in Texas or your great program in California? The agency market, although still there and still prominent, does have its limitations. So thinking a little bit outside of that, can I use agents, but also what's the role of digital? How can I get into that digital space so that, you know what, a student sitting in Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam can go on their cell phone and, you know, view a full hour-long event from my school? How do I get that access? How can I get the best product on that platform to be able to speak directly to that family? So positive news, diversity, there's a way to get there, but really some strategic thinking that schools need to do.
Yeah. And I just want to add to it because I listened to you and Robert Conover, who is our director of sales, always talk about, or I know that some of our listeners are probably thinking, okay, but Cambridge, you always just market students from China or Vietnam or Korea. And for us, that's always just going to be our bread and butter because a majority of our company lives in those regions and those areas. So for us, when you partner with us, that's always going to be your return on investment. Getting students from those. It's the bread and butter. It's where we know. But we do have students that come from different regions as well. It's just our focus and where our offices are in those regions. So we do see predominantly that. But we do have other students. But if you're looking like, okay, I'm investing in recruitment, chances are you're probably going to see your return on investment when it comes to those students. And then all the extras is just like little wins as well. Would you agree? And that or speak more?
100%. I couldn't have said it better myself. You know, the return on investment in terms of the number of students that you're enrolling through our marketing efforts is one part that's super important. Last week I had a call with the school. They have a ton of great international students on their campus, but they're looking for diversity. We had the conversation around, we can market you. We have the expertise within Cambridge to market you anywhere in the world. If you want us to roll out marketing materials for you, you know, in Europe, we can do that. But understanding what that return on investment is going to look like. Right. Are you still going to get 10 students coming from there, just like you've been getting 10 coming from China? Likely not. But what is the value for you on one or maybe two students coming from Spain or from Germany versus 10 students coming from China? Those are the questions you need to ask yourself. We can cater any branding, any marketing, any outreach, any enrollment and application efforts to any region in the world. We have those expertise, but we need to have the conversation about expectations.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, moving on to number 3. U.S. colleges and universities want to host more international students. It says 92% of institutions noted interest in increasing enrollment over the next 5 years.
I mean, you know, to me, the thing that just bangs into my head right there is the fact that it's competitive.
Yeah.
And it will continue to be competitive. More and more schools that 5 years ago, that 2 years ago were not in the market, are looking to be a part of this market. Why?
Yeah.
International students bring, and I think this is one of the points to come, but bring a huge financial incentive for schools. There's no hiding from that. That's a huge part of why we want to be part of this industry as a school partner, and that's great. And they do, absolutely. You get typically students that pay full price and they pay on time, so they sometimes pay ahead, they aren't on payment plans, they aren't on scholarships or discounts. So financially, it makes sense. Number 2, these are just terrific kids, right? They're smart, they are innovative, they add an incredible, intelligence, a different form of intelligence than what we have maybe in the Western world, which is terrific. It adds that great part of having great students on campus. And then number 3 is they add that diversity. They add that element to your community that you can't get if you're not recruiting international students. So again, I keep going on to conversations that I've had last week again, vamped the conversation that I've been having with the school for a while. This is a school that has never, ever been part of the F1 high school market. But for those exact 3 reasons, they've reached out to Cambridge. We're on the brink of a partnership, and they say, we want to get involved. How do we get involved? What do we do? Because we want to see those 3 sort of elements and a couple others that they, mentioned as well. But we want to get those benefits that we get from international students. So it's competitive. More and more schools are going to be coming a part of this conversation and wanting to get their hands in that pie, figuratively. So, again, how are you attracting students? How are you standing out? How are you making yourself different? If you're just going to go, hey, I've got a great academic program, come to me, really think about who's that attracting. Are we going to get students there when the students have, we spoke to our sales team last week in Rhode Island at our summit, and many of them are saying, when a student applies to one school, it's likely that they're applying to 5 or 6 other schools at exactly the same time. So think about that in terms of competition. You've really got to stand out. How do you stand out? What product are you putting out there? How do people know about you? You can have the greatest campus in the world. If nobody sees that campus, if nobody knows about that campus, it's a waste internationally. So again, thinking about having that great campus is important, and we need to have that. We need to have great academic programs and great teachers and awesome college matriculation, but people need to know about that. So those are part of the conversations that we're having.
Yeah, and to add on to the universities and why they're buying in, we talked about this probably more so a couple years ago, but to bring it back into the light, the U.S. birth rate is still declining. And so schools and university aren't just buying into international education because it looks good. It's not just like, oh, we're that school full of diversity, which yes, we love, but they're actually doing it to hold themselves up. They're doing it to have their enrollment and admissions to maintain at the same numbers that they have in the past, all while the birth rate is declining. And another thing, and moving on to number 4 of holding international education, holding up something, international students are important to the U.S. economy and jobs. They are vital right now to us seeing just an increase. And in the government, they're also just placing more regulations that allows more practical work experience to come through international students.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't have said it better. And that's sort of, like you mentioned, that's sort of a continuation of point number 4, right? We want these students. They're great students. They add just so much incredible value, not just at the school level, but then when they go on to university and when they go on to be entrepreneurs and employ people and add to the economy. I think that the article mentions, and this is sort of the number that I always have in my head, is that it's a $40 billion a year industry in the US alone. That's an insane number to think about, right? $40 billion a year. What that says to me as well is that I think a lot of people are often concerned geopolitically about what's happening in the world and what does that mean for international students. $40 billion a year to an economy is a huge amount of money. And that to me says, for the most part, the trend will be that the US government will continue to, and state and local regulations will continue to favor international students because it's a great boost to the economy. So that should be something that I think schools, universities, colleges are looking at and going, there's going to be that long-term support coming from a federal and from a local sort of government perspective. So this is a really good market to get involved in because I'm going to get that support. And I know, sometimes we have some opposition, from governments and from regulation agencies. But I think the general trend, and we've seen this through the past 20, 25, 30 years, has been upwards in terms of the support, in terms of the programs that are out there to support these initiatives, which is great for the industry.
Yeah, totally. The last one, number 5, is that other top host destinations are running out of capacity to host international students. So countries like United Kingdom, Australia, and Canada, they are seeing a lot of numbers go to their region with international education, but they're running out because they just don't have as many programs as the US does.
Yeah. I mean, the simplest way to think about this is the US is a massive piece of land, right? And in that massive piece of land, there's a ton of colleges, there's a ton of universities, there's a ton of schools. So I think that's good because that, hopefully gives many of our schools and our partners a little bit of excitement about the fact that we are, and the US will remain, one of the top choices. And the data continues to show that. However, as the US has so many schools, the competition within the US is going to continue to push up. And we mentioned this earlier, more and more colleges, more and more schools are getting involved. So the competition locally, across the US is going to continue to grow. So bear in mind that maybe 20 years ago, 10 years ago even, your main competition was the one school down the road. Now your competition is East Coast, West Coast, middle of America, South, North. The whole country is your competition. So really, again, thinking about how you're going to position yourself. the final thing that I'll say, and I think this culminates here for me, Mariah, is that we're in a great place right now. It's beginning of or middle of October to talk about and to have the conversations about strategy. What are my goals for my international program today, for next year, and for the next 5 to 10 years? What are my goals for my international program? How does it fit into my goals for my overall enrollment as well, and my overall community and campus that I want to build? Too many schools. I had so many conversations in, April, May, June with schools that are going, we don't have kids. How do we get kids? You need to put the sort of the building blocks and have the conversations and strategize now. If you really want to see that payoff, come spring and come fall of 25. So my advice, I think, from this article would be a lot of good news, a lot of competition, have those conversations sooner rather than later.
Yeah. And I think as I just even processing in our conversation, and I'm like kind of scanning through the article, there at the end of the article, they have a whole section it's labeled ingredients for success. And I haven't said this to Stephen yet, but I think we need to do a part 2 of this episode. And I think what we'll do is that you'll see it. There's like 7 or 8 bullet points of ingredients for success. And what we'll do is we'll break down these and apply them to high school and and so you're reading it and seeing it through the eyes of 2 experts looking at the high school market and applying this information to that. So yeah, Stephen, we got to do that for our listeners.
We got part 2 coming up. I'm excited.
We got part 2 coming up. Yeah. So in 2 weeks after this comes out, we'll have part 2 coming out that breaks down the ingredients for success. But yet again, shout out to the Outlook 30 for the IIE for providing this great resource. The link will be in our show notes. But yeah, look out for part 2. We'll go through that.
Absolutely.
That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, awesome article, really good information there. And feel free to reach out to us, right? We have these discussions. We hope they guide you and they can help you make some decisions at your board level and at your faculty level. But we're happy to have those conversations and help you think through these things. As Mariah mentioned, we'll put the article up in the show notes, have a breeze through it, and look out for us in 2 weeks. We'll be back. We'll be discussing part 2.
Yes.
Awesome. To all of our listeners, that brings the Cambridge Insider podcast to an end for this week. Remember to like, listen, subscribe, share. If you have questions about this article or any past episodes we've done, feel free to drop those in for us and we'll be sure to address them. And we will catch you around the next episode of the Cambridge Insider podcast. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Cambridge Insider podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to never miss an episode. For more Cambridge updates, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Have a great week and stay connected.